Not since the beginning of time has man known such terror.
No. No.
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most iconic monsters was designed by a woman whose name was deliberately erased from history, or that the actor inside the suit nearly died multiple times during filming? Universal Pictures tried to bury these secrets for decades, but the truth beneath the surface is darker and more fascinating than anything that made it to screen. From near-fatal accidents to Hollywood jealousy that destroyed careers, the real story of Creature from the Black Lagoon is a tale of genius, danger, and betrayal that'll make you see this classic monster in a completely different light. Before we dive into these murky waters, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, if you love untold Hollywood secrets and classic monster movies, you're gonna want to stick around for what's coming. And hit that hype button too, so more fans can discover these buried stories. Alright, let's descend into the lagoon. Number 20. The woman Hollywood tried to erase. A brilliant artist named Milicent Patrick designed the creature, then watched her boss steal all the credit. Patrick was no ordinary talent. She'd worked at Disney as an animator before joining Universal's makeup department, and when the studio needed someone to bring the Gill-man to life on paper, she delivered something extraordinary. Those wide black eyes, the ribbed gills, that reptilian grace blended with something disturbingly human, it all came from Patrick's sketches. She didn't just draw a monster, she created an icon. Universal loved her work so much they sent her on a promotional tour, where she proudly posed beside her creation in newspapers across the country. But her boss, Bud Westmore, couldn't handle a woman getting more attention than him. Westmore ordered Patrick's name scrubbed from all publicity materials and took sole credit for the design. For over 50 years, history forgot her contribution entirely. It wasn't until film researchers dug through old memos and photos in the early 2000s that the truth finally surfaced. Today, Patrick's legacy is celebrated in documentaries and even exhibitions at the Smithsonian, but the damage was done. She spent the rest of her career in obscurity, while Westmore basked in glory he never earned. Number 19. The slow-cooking coffin. The creature suit was essentially a wearable oven designed to torture its wearer. Every time Ben Chapman squeezed into that latex nightmare, he was stepping into what crew members called a slow-cooking coffin. Made from thick rubber and foam latex, the costume trapped every degree of heat, every drop of sweat, every breath Chapman took. Under the blazing studio lights, his core temperature would skyrocket within minutes. Production assistants kept buckets of ice water nearby, dousing him between takes just to prevent heat stroke. He couldn't sit down without damaging the suit. He could barely see through the eye holes, and he definitely couldn't hear the director's instructions, which led to multiple blown takes and growing frustration on set. Chapman later described the experience as being buried alive while standing up. The suit weighed over 40 pounds when dry, but once it absorbed his sweat, it became even heavier. Some days he'd lose up to 10 pounds of water weight during a single shoot. The makeup team had to peel the costume off him at the end of each day, and more than once, Chapman nearly collapsed the moment he was freed. Hollywood called it movie magic. Chapman called it 14 hours of hell. Number 18. Real terror on camera. Julie Adams wasn't acting when she looked terrified because she genuinely was. The film's leading lady had a confession that would shock audiences who thought her screams were pure performance. Adams was absolutely petrified of the Florida locations where they filmed. The thought of swimming in those murky springs knowing there could be alligators, snakes, or God knows what lurking beneath her feet made her freeze up completely. When director Jack Arnold asked her to wade into Wakulla Springs for certain scenes, she flat out refused. It took multiple attempts and the promise of stunt doubles before she'd even consider it. But even when her stunt double handled the underwater work, Adams still had to film scenes with Ben Chapman in full creature makeup reaching for her. In the dim lighting of the cave sets, that rubber suit looked disturbingly real. Adams later admitted there were moments when she had to mentally remind herself it was just a movie, even as those webbed claws brushed against her skin and the creature's face loomed inches from hers. Her panic wasn't staged for the camera. It was genuine, visceral fear that happened to make for incredible cinema. Sometimes the best performances come from real terror, and Adams delivered that in every scream. Number 17. The underwater double nobody knew about. The most famous scene in the movie wasn't even performed by its star actress. That haunting underwater ballet, the moment when Kay Lawrence floats gracefully above the creature as he follows her shadow from below, remains one of the most beautiful images in 1950s horror cinema. It's poetry in motion, a silent dance between predator and prey. But it wasn't Julie Adams in the water. The woman performing those elegant movements was Ginger Stanley Hallowell, a professional swimmer and stunt performer who could hold her breath and move underwater with an almost supernatural grace. Filmed in the crystal-clear springs of Wakulla, the sequence required Hallowell to perform blind, wearing only a thin white bathing suit in cold water with limited visibility. Meanwhile, Ricou Browning in the full creature costume approached from below without goggles or air tanks, relying purely on memorized choreography to hit his marks. One miscalculation and he could have slammed into her or run out of air completely. But somehow, through instinct and incredible skill, they pulled off one of cinema's most mesmerizing sequences. Two performers moving in perfect synchronization, suspended between danger and beauty. It wasn't just stunt work. It was art captured in a single impossible breath. Number 16. One monster, two bodies. The secret behind the Gill-man's unsettling realism was that he wasn't played by one actor, but by two performers with radically different skill sets. On land, trudging through muddy lagoon sets and stalking through caves, it was Ben Chapman inside the suit. Chapman brought weight and menace to the creature, a lumbering, powerful presence that felt dangerous and unpredictable. But the moment the Gill-man entered the water, everything changed. Underwater, the creature became Ricou Browning, a champion diver from Florida whose movements were so fluid and graceful they barely seemed human. Browning could hold his breath for nearly 4 minutes, long enough to glide past the camera without a single bubble breaking the illusion. What made this dual performance so brilliant was how seamlessly their styles merged. Chapman's slow, threatening movements on land gave the creature raw power. Browning's weightless underwater choreography gave him an otherworldly elegance, two completely different approaches stitched together so perfectly that audiences believed they were watching one being moved between two worlds. In reality, it was two men risking heat exhaustion and drowning just to make the monster feel alive. Number 15. Hollywood's 3D gamble that almost failed. The film was shot using true polarized 3D technology that pushed 1950s cinema to its absolute limits. When Creature from the Black Lagoon hit theaters in 1954, audiences didn't just watch it, they ducked. Universal released the movie using a dual-strip polarized 3D system, projecting two reels simultaneously through synchronized lenses. Viewers wore special polarized glasses to experience monsters leaping straight from the screen. For many kids, it was their first taste of true cinematic immersion and their first reason to spill popcorn in sheer terror. But pulling off this technical marvel nearly broke the production. Cameron wrestled with bulky rigs the size of refrigerators, and every single underwater shot had to be recalibrated for stereoscopic depth. One lens out of sync and the entire illusion shattered. Even Ricou Browning's graceful underwater movements were specifically choreographed to maximize the 3D effect, with arms extending toward the lens and claws reaching just past the audience's noses. Most 3D films of that era faded into forgotten novelties, but Creature from the Black Lagoon proved the format could feel genuinely alive. For those who saw it in theaters, fear existed in 3 dimensions. Number 14. The breathtaking risk that nearly killed him. Ricou Browning performed one of cinema's most dangerous underwater stunts, pushing his body to terrifying limits. While filming the underwater sequences in Florida's springs, Browning couldn't use standard air tanks because the bubbles would ruin every shot and shatter the illusion that the creature was truly amphibious. His solution was both brilliant and reckless. For shorter takes, he held his breath for up to 4 minutes while performing complex choreography in a heavy rubber suit that restricted his movement. He'd sink beneath the surface, count silently in his head, then drift into frame and hold perfectly still so no telltale bubbles would rise. For longer sequences, he relied on an air hose connected to the surface, but even that carried deadly risk. The camera crew said watching him was genuinely eerie, like filming something that defied human biology. Browning later admitted there were multiple close calls where he pushed too far, staying under just seconds longer to nail the perfect take, then surfacing dizzy and disoriented. One miscalculation, one moment of panic in that keyhole visibility, and he could have blacked out 30 feet down in a costume that would have become his tomb. Number 13. The Amazon was actually Florida. The film might claim it takes place deep in the steamy jungles of South America, but the real Black Lagoon was pure Florida sunshine. Those haunting, shimmering underwater shots of the Gill-man drifting beneath swimmers were filmed in Wakulla Springs and Silver Springs, two of the clearest bodies of water in the United States. Their crystal transparency gave cinematographers the illusion of an endless underwater world, with sunlight slicing through the depths like liquid glass. It was the perfect disguise for the Amazon. No piranhas, no anacondas, just a prehistoric calm that looked too beautiful to be dangerous. But filming there came with its own hazards. Divers fought unpredictable currents that could sweep them off course. Browning risked blackouts while holding his breath for minutes at a time, and the camera crew had to meticulously hide every air bubble to maintain the illusion of an untouched primeval world. Locals who visited the set during filming swore the water seemed to come alive, with schools of fish suddenly darting away as if they sensed something ancient moving through their territory. It was all Hollywood trickery, but under that relentless Florida heat, it felt like the jungle was breathing alongside them. Number 12. The injury nobody talked about. Ben Chapman accidentally hurt Julie Adams during filming, and the studio covered it up. The creature suit didn't just torture Chapman, it turned him into a genuine hazard. During one intense scene where the Gill-man carries Kay Lawrence through a cave, Chapman misjudged his footing. The limited visibility through the suit's eye holes meant he couldn't see properly, and he accidentally scraped Adams' head against the rough cave wall. She cried out, the crew rushed in, and for a tense moment everyone thought the chute might be shut down. Fortunately, Adams wasn't seriously injured, just shaken and bruised, but the incident revealed just how dangerous these productions were. Chapman was essentially blind, overheated, and disoriented while carrying a woman through tight spaces lined with jagged rocks. The studio quickly moved past the accident, not wanting any negative press that might scare audiences or slow production. Adams, professional as ever, insisted they continue filming, but that moment captured the brutal reality behind the movie magic. Every scene with the creature involved real physical risk, and sometimes the monster's menace wasn't just performance, it was genuine danger. Number 11. The backlot lake that became the Amazon. Universal didn't travel to South America for those iconic boat scenes. They filmed them in a parking lot's backyard. The shots of the Rita gliding through mist-shrouded waters, with the creature lurking just beneath the surface, were captured on a park lake, a man-made body of water sitting right on Universal's own backlot. The same lake that had hosted Frankenstein's monster, the Invisible Man, and even Abbott and Costello became the edge of the unknown every time cameras rolled. Cinematographers worked magic with fog machines, hanging vines from cranes, and shooting from low angles to hide the studio walls just beyond the tree line. Between takes, actors would step out of the Amazon and straight into California sunshine, grabbing coffee while crew members reset the smoke. But on film, the illusion held perfectly. The still water, the shadows, the reflections, it all felt authentically remote and threatening. That's the genius of classic Hollywood. A few strategic tricks, some clever lighting, and suddenly you've transported audiences 1,000 miles away. In truth, the scariest part of the Amazon was just a short walk from the studio commissary. Number 10. 3 composers, 0 credit. The creature's iconic musical theme was written by genius composers who never got their names on screen. Every time the Gill-man appears, 3 piercing notes slash through the silence, a sound so primal it feels like fear itself surfacing from the depths. That shriek of brass became one of cinema's most recognizable monster themes, right up there with the screeching violins from Psycho. But here's what audiences never knew. The composers behind it never received proper credit. The iconic creature motif wasn't written by one person, but by 3 separate musicians working under Universal's oppressive studio system. Herman Stein, Hans J. Salter, and a young Henry Mancini, years before he'd write the Pink Panther theme, all contributed to the score. Universal treated film music like disposable background noise, recycling cues from movie to movie, and refusing to credit individual composers. None of them were officially acknowledged, even though their combined work gave the Gill-man his heartbeat. That sharp musical sting transformed a man in a rubber suit into something that felt genuinely alive. It warned audiences before they even saw him lurking in the water. Critics later noted how the score almost functioned as a character itself, stalking the film's heroes from beneath the surface. The creature might vanish into the depths, but that sound still surfaces every time horror wants to make you flinch. Number 9. The design that blended beauty and terror. What made the Gill-man's appearance so disturbing wasn't just the scales and gills, it was how eerily human he looked. Milicent Patrick's brilliant design blended amphibian anatomy with something unsettlingly familiar. The wide-set eyes weren't just fish-like, they had an expressive quality that suggested intelligence and emotion. The ribbed gills along his body gave him an alien appearance, but the overall silhouette was humanoid enough to create deep psychological unease. This wasn't some abstract blob or insect monster. This was something that could have been us, or might still be lurking in evolutionary shadows we've forgotten. Patrick studied actual amphibians and fish for anatomical accuracy, but she also incorporated subtle human proportions that made the creature feel like a missing link rather than a complete alien. The result was a design that tapped into primal fears about what might be watching us from the water, something close enough to human to recognize us but different enough to see us as prey. That careful balance between familiar and foreign is what made the Gill-man's appearance so legendary. He wasn't just scary, he was uncomfortably believable. Number 8. The secret weight that created the glide. Director Jack Arnold added a hidden element to the costume that changed everything about how the creature moved. To create that distinctive gliding effect when the Gill-man walked on land, Arnold had the costume designers add 10 pounds of lead weights to the feet of the suit. Chapman didn't just lumber through scenes because he was hot and exhausted, though he definitely was. He was literally weighed down, forced to move with a slow, deliberate gait. that made the creature seem heavier and more powerful than a normal human. The added weight changed Chapman's entire physicality. Instead of walking, he had to kind of push forward, creating that signature menacing shuffle that made the Gill-man seem unstoppable. Every step looked effortful, purposeful, threatening. It was a small technical detail that most audiences never noticed consciously, but it fundamentally shaped how terrifying the creature felt on land. Chapman, already struggling with heat and limited visibility, now had to haul extra weight with every single movement. What looked like intentional monster choreography was actually an actor fighting against a costume actively working against him. Sometimes the best creative choices are the ones that make everything harder. Number 7. The drunken dinner party that started it all. The entire film was born from a ghost story told over wine and cigarettes at a Hollywood party. In the early 1940s, producer William Alland attended a dinner party hosted by none other than Orson Welles. Among the guests was Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa, who shared a strange legend from the Amazon about half-human fish people who lived in hidden lagoons and would kidnap maidens from nearby villages. The image stuck in Allen's mind like a haunting dream. Years later, while working at Universal, he dug out his old notes labeled The Sea Monster, and the Gill-man began taking shape. From that single intoxicated tale grew one of cinema's most enduring creatures. Alland and screenwriter Harry Essex transformed the folklore into science fiction, replacing ancient curses with evolutionary theory and giving the legend a tragic romantic pulse. What began as a campfire story told in the dark became a mirror for humanity's obsession with the unknown, that primal fear of what might still be lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to pull us under. The creature didn't crawl from a swamp, he crawled out of a story that refused to be forgotten. Number 6. The last great Universal monster. By 1954, Universal's golden age of monsters was gasping its final breaths. Dracula's cape had lost its menacing shadow. Frankenstein's bolts were more nostalgia than nightmare. The Wolfman's howl echoed mostly on late-night television marathons. Then, just when it seemed the studio's monster legacy was finished, they unleashed something completely new. The Gill-man wasn't a supernatural curse or a mad scientist's mistake. He was a living relic of evolution itself, dragged from the depths of prehistoric time to face the modern world. That made him terrifying in a fresh way. Not impossible, but disturbingly plausible. Audiences fell instantly in love. Kids begged for creature toys. Theaters sold out 3D screenings week after week. Critics called him the missing link between classic Gothic horror and atomic-age science fiction. He became the bridge between two eras, the last of the original Universal monsters and the firstborn from Cold War anxiety about what humanity might awaken next. The world was genuinely afraid of what scientific progress could uncover, and the Gill-man embodied that fear with scales and sorrow. The Black Lagoon didn't just close an era, it crowned it with one final, perfect monster. Number 5. The Beauty and the Beast Nobody Expected. At its core, Creature from the Black Lagoon isn't really a monster movie at all. It's a tragic love story doomed from the very first frame. Beneath the scales and snarls, the Gill-man isn't hunting Kay Lawrence, he's reaching for her. When he rises from the depths and sees her swimming above him, something fundamental shifts inside. The look in his eyes isn't just hunger or predatory instinct, it's curiosity, longing, maybe even recognition. The filmmakers deliberately wove a Beauty and the Beast theme into the story, transforming the monster into a lonely soul caught between instinct and impossible desire. That emotional undercurrent is what made audiences remember him long after they left the theater. He wasn't a mindless killing machine like Godzilla or a symbol of science gone horribly wrong. He was a creature yearning for connection and punished violently for every attempt. The more he tried to reach the surface, the more brutally the human world pushed him back into the depths. It's tragedy wrapped in rubber and water, and it hits harder than any jump scare. The Gill-man didn't just want to survive, he wanted to be seen, to be understood, to matter to someone. And that's what breaks your heart. Number 4. The poster that made him immortal. Before audiences even saw the creature rise from the water, they were completely hooked by a single image. The theatrical poster for Creature from the Black Lagoon remains one of the most recognizable pieces of art in horror history. The Gill-man clutching a screaming woman as bubbles swirl through an emerald abyss, it's seared into pop culture's memory. That unforgettable artwork came from Ricou Browning, a young illustrator who would go on to define the entire visual language of 1950s science fiction cinema. Brown's brush gave Universal's fading monsters their teeth back, transforming pulp horror into mythic pop art. What makes this poster genuinely special isn't just the technical skill, though that's undeniable. It's the tone Brown captured. He found the movie's perfect contradiction, terror and beauty locked in one desperate embrace. His bold colors and exaggerated motion made the creature seem both violently dangerous and strangely romantic, echoing the film's forbidden love story undertones. It wasn't just marketing material designed to sell tickets, it was storytelling frozen in one perfect moment. Long before the first scream echoed in theaters, long before anyone saw Ricou Browning glide through those crystal springs, Reynold Brown had already made the creature immortal with nothing but paint and vision. Number 3. The movement that inspired James Cameron. Ricou Browning's aquatic grace didn't just define one monster, it redefined how cinema portrayed underwater movement forever. Most movie monsters of that era stomped, snarled, and crashed through walls with brute force, but the Gill-man glided. Underwater, he moved with a strange elegance that was almost hypnotic, thanks entirely to the man inside the suit. Browning, a champion diver and Florida native, brought something to the role that nobody had ever seen in horror before: genuine beauty. He didn't swim like a man pretending to be a monster. He moved like something ancient and effortless, born in the depths and completely at home there. Every slow turn, every reach of those webbed hands, felt more like underwater ballet than a predatory chase. To capture that otherworldly illusion, Browning performed in Wakulla Springs without air tanks, relying entirely on his lung capacity and instinct. He'd vanish beneath the surface, silently drift into frame, then hold perfectly still so no bubbles would rise and shatter the magic. Decades later, James Cameron admitted he studied those exact scenes when choreographing the fluid motion of aliens in underwater sequences for The Abyss. Browning didn't just play the monster, he taught an entire generation of filmmakers how legends should move. Number 2. The remake that finally happened. Guillermo del Toro's rejected pitch became an Oscar-winning masterpiece. As a kid watching Creature from the Black Lagoon, del Toro didn't see a monster. He saw someone profoundly misunderstood. To him, the real tragedy wasn't the horror but the heartbreak, the creature reaching desperately for connection and being violently rejected at every turn. So when he became a filmmaker with real power in Hollywood, del Toro pitched Universal a bold remake. The same story but told entirely through the creature's eyes. In his version, the monster and the woman wouldn't just share a momentary connection, they'd fall genuinely, deeply in love. The studio executives passed immediately, saying modern audiences wanted screams and thrills, not interspecies romance. Del Toro walked away from that dream, or so everyone thought. Decades later, he quietly built his own lagoon. The Shape of Water, released in 2017, carried the exact same DNA. An amphibious creature, a fragile woman, a love story that defied nature and fear itself. The difference was this time, nobody could tell him no. The film swept the Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Best Director, and 2 additional statues. What Universal had dismissed as too weird, too unmarketable, became the most celebrated fantasy film of its generation. Del Toro didn't remake the Gill-man story. He finally gave him the ending he'd always deserved, the one where love wins and the monster gets to be seen as something more than a nightmare. Number 1. The remake graveyard. The creature's legacy refuses to sink, but Hollywood has tried and failed to resurrect him countless times. Decades after his first splash, the Gill-man still casts an impossibly long shadow over cinema. He's appeared in everything from The Monster Squad to serving as spiritual inspiration for The Shape of Water, haunting generations of filmmakers who grew up staring into those glassy black eyes. Universal has attempted to bring him back again and again, planned remakes in the 1980s that never made it past pre-production. The failed Dark Universe initiative in the 2010s that was supposed to resurrect all the classic monsters but collapsed spectacularly after The Mummy bombed. Countless pitches from acclaimed directors that never made it past the studio boardroom. And currently, there are whispers that James Wan is developing yet another attempt to drag the creature back from the depths. Yet every single time Hollywood tries to resurrect him, they end up rediscovering the same frustrating truth: you can't improve on perfection. What made the Gill-man timeless wasn't cutting-edge effects or massive budgets, it was raw emotion. He was the last Universal monster with a heart that beat louder than his roar, the outsider, the misunderstood, the beautiful thing feared and attacked simply for being different. Every generation sees itself in that iconic silhouette emerging from dark water. The Black Lagoon might have gone still decades ago, but its reflection keeps moving through art, horror, and every story about the unknown that refuses to stay buried. Some monsters vanish into dusty archives and forgotten film reels. This one never sank. He just kept swimming forward, inspiring everyone brave enough to follow him into the depths. From a myth whispered at a Hollywood dinner table to a creature that shaped 7 decades of cinema, Creature from the Black Lagoon proved that true horror doesn't always come from shadows or jump scares. Sometimes it rises slowly from still water, unexpected and unavoidable. Beneath the rubber suit, behind the fog machines, and under those shimmering Florida springs, there was real artistry, genuine danger, and surprising heart. The film wasn't just another monster flick churned out by the studio system, it was a story about beauty and fear, and everything complex that exists between them. Every generation since has tried to bring the Gill-man back, to capture that same magic, but nobody has truly surpassed what Jack Arnold's team created in 1954. Maybe that's because he's more than just a monster in a suit. He's a mirror, reflecting our endless fascination with the unknown and our deep fear of what that fascination might reveal about ourselves. The lagoon may be quiet now, but the ripples he created still reach every corner of pop culture, still influence every filmmaker who dares to ask what lurks beneath the surface. So tell me, which secret pulled you deepest into these dark waters? Drop a comment below with your favorite fact, and if you enjoyed this dive into classic Hollywood's buried stories, make sure you're subscribed because there's so much more to uncover. Don't forget to hype this video so more monster fans can find their way into the Black Lagoon. Until next time, keep questioning what history tried to hide.